Hello there folks, it's the new year and it's time to get back to work. We're going to start right in to building the new hanging locker for the aft cabin. Let's get on with it. If this is your first visit to Travels with Geordie, please feel welcome. My name is Peter and I live aboard this classic old wooden motor cruiser here in Victoria, British Columbia, along with my pup Geordie. All the while I'm fixing it up to do some pretty major cruising someday, and if that's the sort of thing you might be interested in, please consider sticking around and subscribing. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank my patrons, whom without I couldn't possibly do this every week. I'm so grateful to you all. Okay, so as I said, today is a hanging locker for the aft cabin, which is the master's cabin. This whole cabin is basically my bedroom, and that just works great for me. Big plans for this area coming up later. What's next? As I said, a hanging locker. So basically, because the window doesn't come all the way to the bulkhead, I have an advantage in that I can use this space and build out this way, roughly 22 inches, which isn't quite standard cabinet depth, hanging locker depth, but it'll certainly do. A hanger fits in there fine, and it'll come along to here and come in against the companionway, but not quite. The face of it will come all the way, but this side will actually be a hollow, a void on this side. So this will become the wet locker, or basically place to hang my coat and other people's coats. A row of coat hooks here, a little slot up above for umbrella, and down in the bottom there'll be a little well that can catch wetness. So it is, in that sense, a wet locker, umbrella stand, etc., stuff like that. But from the face of it, it'll just look like a standard piece of cabinetry, but the inside of the hanging locker will basically be from here over. Anyway, that's enough. Let's get on with it. Plywood work. Big cutting. And so I don't know if you can see it down there, but this is the exhaust pipe, which I put a new hole in the bulkhead when I put it in. And in my bliss of getting this done, I didn't really consider what I was going to be doing in the future. And well, this is not in a very convenient space, either in here or in the lazarette aft here. So it's going to move. Blah, 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 blah. I'm going to move it. I don't want to move it today, but I have to. It's gonna take forever and you don't want to watch. Hey, I'll show you bringing the boat back from downtown. keep us afloat. Okay, well, I'm gonna say that was no fun. It was no fun to put it in. It was no fun to get it out. It'll be no fun to put it back in again. Okay, now we get to work. All right then, I really don't want to talk about what poured out of the exhaust pipe when I removed it. I have a feeling something was living in there, but not anymore. Okay, well, with that dealt with and rinsed and done with. Okay, now, as I was mentioning, there are no flat surfaces. Nothing is aligned, nothing is square here. So I need to start with something square. So I'm going to start with a vertical member here that I'm going to work off of. So basically, once I've got that set and I can square at least vertically to the side of the frame of the companionway door, we can start to see something. This is one of those projects that you can't really tell what you're doing until you start to see some of it in place. So let's start to put some of it in place. I'll start with this piece of spruce I have to make a template, and at least to start to align to see what's going to go on, because immediately after that I'll also build a bottom of the cabinet, because I'm going to leave about 4 inches under the cabinet. It'll go from 4 inches at this end to maybe only about 1.5 inches, 2 inches at that end because of the slope of the sole. And in that space are going to be the plenums for both a ventilation system that will evacuate the bilge, because I'm going to have longitudinal ducts in here to pull air out of the bilge for the blower system, and also the front edge of that will have another plenum for a warm air delivery for heat, which will come from a heater and heat exchanger from hot water. Anyway, lots more information than you need now. The point is, I'm going to build a false floor. That's all it is. All right, then, after much deliberation, I have changed my mind, and instead of starting with something here, I'm going to start with a platform, the plinth, the false floor I was talking about. And once that is square with the world, whatever that is, I think it'll be easier to work my way up from there. Why am I telling you all this? The one vertical line back here is the seam of the plywood on the bulkhead. So from there, I can create a reasonably horizontal line to get started with. So against this straightest line on the boat, I can now start to scribe for a piece to go on the front here. And again, this is not elegant, but it's mainly a template. There we go. And then when that moves out here, I'll put a ledger across the back and we can get started with this. Perfect. So this will go out here and create the base for my false floor. So let's get a ledger on there and get some plywood cut. All right then, so the base of this closet hanging locker is going to be marine ply, 1/2 inch marine ply. So I just need to cut out a little piece for that and we're good. Whoa, you stay there. There we go. What am I missing? What am I missing? That's what I'm missing. Alrighty. Now I finally found a use for this piece of sapwood or heartwood. I'm actually not quite sure what this is. I won't say it's sapwood. It's just discolored and I can't use it for much, but I can certainly use it for a ledger. So we'll rip 1 inch off of this and then we're going to bevel it to the 5 degrees that the bulkhead is. Tape measure. Let's tip this over to 5 degrees or so. Tip this all up, tip this all down. Oof. Okay. All right then. Let's see how this works. I'm super pleased with that, and I'm going to assume it's flat. Now, the astute amongst you will have noticed that I'm using nice marine ply for the bottom of the cabinet. I use mahogany
for the cleat or whatever, but I'm using this nasty piece of spruce for the front edge against the sole because all of this is removable. Of course, the sole needs to be rebuilt. Of course, I need to get down into the bilge and work on the bilge, the boat, the framing, all kinds of stuff. Everything I put into the boat has to be removable as a component. So this whole section here will be removable as a component after the panels of the hanging locker above are removable as a component, because I want to be able to get at everything below easily in the future. Let's screw this together. Now, as this front piece of spruce is temporary, I've put a few pocket screws in here to screw it down to the sole to keep everything nicely in alignment until I can redo this. And of course, when that is done, when I rebuild the sole, I'll replace this piece of spruce with a nice piece of mahogany. Okay, now to cut up some really good mahogany. So this is going to be the main corner vertical, we'll call them posts, but they're really stiles. Of the 4 panels that are going to go across. And it's always a juggle of how wide should the panels be, how wide should the stiles be, the rhythm and the texture of it, plus what can you get out of your piece of wood. This is a 9-inch piece of wood, minus curves, so you're always kind of juggling to do the best you can. So I'm settling on 1 3/4 inch stiles. Let's rip some of those up. Okay, I chickened out. The truth is, out of a 9-inch board, I can't do 1 5/8 times 5 because the edges are still rough. I was counting on them being smooth. So I can't get 5 planks out of it. I'm only going to get 4 because I can't go to 1.5 inches. That's just too much. So we're going to do roughly 2-inch, good and solid, lots of extra room. All right, we do need a bit of an explanation of how I'm going to make this. So basically, if I'm looking aft again, and so this is the camber of the overhead and the cabin side. And actually, there's a little bump here where the deck comes out and then down. And then there's the sole, which is curved like that. And we now have a nice platform in here, which we've built, which is square and plywood top. So because I'm going to build the bench in front, I mentioned to you briefly before, there's going to be a bottom plinth. Let's say it's this high right here. And it'll end up with like a bead, very much like, well, everything else I do, which is basically a 1x on its side. And below that will be a panel. And the panel will look largely like this. So it will be rail and style, and with a 1/4 inch mahogany panel inside. And then on top of that, I will build 4 panels in a row. And they're going to end up in a curved top. So the curve will follow largely the edge of the curve of the cabin overhead until it gets to about its own half point and then come back down again. At which point there'll be a little headpiece, and then the bottom of that will curve and do the same thing. And below that will go a bead, in other words, about a 3/8 piece of mahogany that will act as a little bead, stick out the edge. You've seen me do that before. Okay, so then below that it gets pretty straightforward. There are 4 panels. Because of this bump out here, this panel starts here and there'll be filler pieces in behind. Okay, so the panels will go, I'm just going to draw a line down the middle to divide the panels into 4, roughly 1 feet wide. And each of these panels will be rail and style, curved at the top, well, of course, and straight at the bottom. And if we just finish up, they'll look roughly like that. And these individual frame pieces are 2-inch wide, and they're the ones that I just ripped. I should have drawn this all on the computer. How about that? I did a big 3D drawing of the boat and everything, and I'm still making it up as I go along. So it'll look roughly like this. Right at this point in here, there'll be another little detail, very much like I put on the aft cabin door, which breaks up this panel. Okay, so this panel and this panel are doors. Here are the hinges. Here and here and here and here. This panel and this panel are structural and they're perfect. I mean, they're permanent. Of course they're perfect. And of course the panel at the bottom is permanent. So I thought I was going to make full height corner posts, but I'm not, because of the way this lower cabinet, this lower base is going to work out. So it's going to be a separate piece, which is removable, and then the plinth is removable. So we're going to carry on by building this bottom one first. And because there's so much rail and style, this is all rail and style, which all needs a cross section through there is going to look like this, right? With a notch in it for the plywood to go in. I want to do that all at once. So it's a little difficult to be making some parts of it in advance of others because I want to do all the rail and style work at the same time. So I'm going to fiddle with it a little bit and see where we get to in terms of all this geometry. Yeah, at least now, you know, sort of what it'll look like. A couple of knobs, it'll be nice. The point also that these can open all the way around and then not enter into the room so that they can be out of the way. I like it. All right, so this plinth base piece, whatever, we'll call this the plinth, then we'll call it the next section the base. The base needs to be high enough so that I can build a bench here, a chair, something to replace this one I'm sitting on now, and have an armrest. I like an armrest so that the door, that when it opens here, can open over the armrest. Obviously not while you're sitting here, although it's only a foot wide, you could almost do it. Now, this will actually be further back and I'll be tucked in under the deck. But in principle, the armrest will be roughly this high. Maybe an inch lower, but not much. So off the plinth, that's now 20, let's call it 20 inches. I like that. And what that gets used for, I'm not entirely sure. It's below the hanging locker. So if you had long clothes, a dress perhaps, it would hang down into there, although you'd have to slip it over as you put it in the hanging locker. Good place to put shoes and stuff like that. It'll be separate from the bilge. This will be a panel here so that there'll be no bilge air in it, and it should be clean and dry. So I think it's a pretty good storage space, and it's not, certainly not wasted space. And then the doors start above that. So just got to build a base here. Yeah, let's go. All right, well, I've just spent about 2 hours measuring and adjusting and thinking and drawing and doodling and strategizing, and I'm going to do exactly what I thought I was going to do 2 hours ago, but I pretty much got it under control. I've got it all in my head at once now, and we're going to make the base. Let's make the base. So, yeah. Pretty straightforward. I think it's going to be 49 by 20 and a quarter. I'm just going to cut some wood up. Yeah. 45, 46, 47, 48, 49. All right. Pencil. Yes. Now, because it's super crucial that these are exactly the same length, I'm going to cut them together. It just makes it easier. Sometimes this safety guard doesn't come around. Don't have a free hand. My old friend, the rudder table. The one that I can only just barely stand, but yeah. Okay, so I've just done a little test route out to plow out a slot to try it on my mahogany plywood. And yes, it's a great fit on the veneered plywood. Now, if you've been following along, you know that I have at least two kinds of mahogany plywood over here now. One is a genuine veneered mahogany on one side, spruce on the back, maybe spruce, maybe hemlock, I don't know what it is. The other is mahogany both sides, except it's an MDF core. I've already taken all the grief I need for that. I'm not taking any more. The only reason I'll ever need the ones with the MDF core is on the doors, because when I open the doors, I want to see mahogany on the inside of the door. I don't want to see whatever it is on the back of that. Birch, I think. So I'm going to use the solid veneered wood for all of the cabinetry, with the exception of the two doors that have to open. The drag about that is that the MDF cord stuff is slightly thinner, so it's a little bit loose in this little test block I made, but I'm not going to go to the trouble of getting another rubber bit, cutting a different slot for the 2 center doors. I'm really just going to put a little bit of filler in to make sure that it looks just dandy. Okay, let's make up some stuff here. Now, I'm going to do a modified rail and style or mortise and tenon system. Normally what you would do, let me get some stuff here. If you were meeting, let's make just a little mini door here. If you were making a door like this, you would cut a trough in one inside of each panel, each side of each piece that the plywood would sit in. But then this trough would cut right down to the end, and you'd put a tongue on the end of this by making 2 more cuts. So that would slide into there, making a nice joint. You've all seen what they look like with the little tongue sticking up into there. Great. But you know what? It's a lot of work to cut the tongue to make it fit perfectly. So what I'm going to do, a slightly modified version, I'm going to cut only dados in the side pieces and, in other words, the stiles and the rails. And I'm going to go right to the end and right across the end so that you'll have a gap in both directions here, and I'm going to put a spline in. So instead of having a mortise and tenon, I'm going to have a mortise and tenon and mortise. And I really don't feel bad about that. I've done it before. It makes a very solid, very convenient, very handy way to make a genuine door-ish. Let's go. Alright then, so all the dados are cut for the plywood panels. Now I have to cut the end ones in the rails, which are the horizontal pieces, so that I can put the spline in against the vertical piece. So the problem is that I can't hold these vertically. I have to put the rudder table on the sole. Yuck. Okay, with that done, time for my next favorite game, which is cutting the plywood. And the worst part of cutting the plywood is getting at the plywood. You've seen me do this before. Alright, and down. Okay. Here we go. So this is the back side of the good one side, which is what I'm going to use for this particular panel. And I'm going to leave it with the back side up because the circular saw is going to cut up through it, meaning that this is the side that will break out and the other side should remain good. Well, hello and welcome to the Beer of the Week. Today I'm going back to my favorite brewery, Driftwood here in Victoria, for their Black Stone Porter. Never tried it before. I've been waiting to give this a go. It's gonna pour good and dark, I'm sure. Oh yeah, inky goodness. Absolutely fabulous. I'm not a huge fan of porters, but if it's from Driftwood, I'm going to give it a shot. Let's see what we think of this. Cheers. Whoa, that's bold. That's a full-on porter, no doubt about it. We'll wait for the helicopter. You'll notice my beer has gone flat. That's because the Coast Guard over here has decided to choose Beer of the Week time to do a little helicopter training. Well, cheers to you and the Coast Guard. I'm grateful you're there. But who I also really want to thank is Larry McNeil, who sent me out a pair of circuit breakers from the Amazon wish list. So grateful, Larry. I'm just starting to get geared up for rewiring the boat, so anything along those lines is very, very, very appreciated because this stuff is ridiculously expensive, especially when you get into lots of it. Okay, very good. Well, thanks again to all of you for watching and subscribing, giving a thumbs up when you can and a share when you can, and stick around. We'll see you next week. Cheers. It's growing on me.